So guys, we're first going to have a brief introduction about the exam. Okay, and then we're going to start with the first task. So the exam is called PTE, or Pearson Test of English. Just a brief introduction. So the exam is completely computerized. What do we mean by this? It means that like any other academic exams, we got this speaking, writing, reading, and listening module. And it's in the same order, but it's all done by a computer. So for those who are not familiar with the PTE exam, the exam is overall 2 hours. It could be a bit less, but it's not more than 2 hours. And it's a completely computer-based exam. So there's no humans involved in scoring this exam. For the speaking part, and look, you're going to sit in front of a computer, you're going to have a headset with a microphone and a keyboard. For the speaking section, you're going to mostly speak into the microphone. We're going to do the first task today. For the writing part, we got 2 tasks, which involves like the essay part, summarizing the text. Reading is mostly fill in the blanks, and for the listening section, we got 8 different tasks. So it's all done by a computer, and it's scored by a computer. So there's no humans involved in this exam. It is scored by the computer itself. Your exam results you will usually get them the same day as you take the exam, but you might get the results like the day after or in 2 or 3 days. But you usually get the exam results in the same day. So you might have heard that it's easier than other English academic exam. That is kind of true, but in case that you know the techniques. If you don't know the techniques, it will be really difficult for you to get a high score in this exam. We had students which were IELTS examiners, or IELTS teachers, actually, not examiners, but IELTS teachers, which even without learning the techniques, they took the exam and they got a low score. That was because they didn't know how to use templates, how to use techniques in this exam. They didn't know how to manage their time. But we will tell you all of these throughout these 12 sessions, which will do these 20 tasks of the PTE exam. So why is it easier? It's actually, I'm not going to say it's easier. It's actually easier to get a higher score in PTE. So if you're aiming for a 65 plus, which equals to a 7 in IELTS, or if you're aiming for an 8 in IELTS, which equals to 79 in PTE, that score is much more achievable. It's easier to achieve in PTE compared to IELTS or TOEFL or other academic exams. And it's because of the templates. Let me give you an example. In the essay part in IELTS, if you memorize an essay and just write it there, they're probably going to give you a pretty low score. But what we do in PTE is for the essay part, I'm going to give you a template, which is prefabricated, it's already ready. You just got to memorize it, type it there in the exam, and there are some blanks which you have to fill the blanks according to the question. Okay, so this is what I mean by templates. This is what makes it easier, and it's actually easier to get a higher score in PTE. Who accepts PTE? The Australian Immigration Office, New Zealand Immigration Office, the United Kingdom also recently accepts PTE for immigration purposes. 90% of the universities in Australia, in Canada, in the UK also accept PTE. Many other universities in the United States, in America, in Europe, in Asia also accept PTE, and it's growing every day, the amount of universities who accept PTE. The exam centers. So there are different exam centers. What is the difference between exam centers? So first of all, it's the price. It depends on the country that you're taking the exam. For example, as far as I know, like in Turkey, it's pretty cheap to take the exam, but in other countries, it depends on the country. So it's a computer-based exam, right? So you're going to use a computer, a headset, a keyboard. Because it's a computerized exam, you want to take your exam in an exam center which has updated computers, which has a good internet speed, like an appropriate headset. So these are some factors which will make you at the end choose the most appropriate and the best exam center. We will talk about the exam centers later on. So let's begin. The first part is the introduction part. Let me tell you something. This section, it isn't scored, but it will be sent together with your score report to the institution you've selected. So it is not scored. Again, let me repeat this. It is not scored, but it will be sent together with your score report to the institution you've selected. So you got 25 seconds to prepare, 30 seconds to speak. You don't need to speak the whole 30 seconds. You can speak 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and introduce yourself. So there's nothing specific. This is an introduction that I use myself. We tell our students they can use the same thing, and it's not necessary to bring the exact sentences. You can change it however you want to. So let me just read it for you guys once so you can see what it is. My name is Sina. I'm 33 years old. I live in Sydney, Australia. I've studied chemical engineering and I'm currently working as a PTE tutor. My favorite hobbies are reading books and spending time with my family. Today, I'm here to take the PT exam and test my English abilities. So this is the introduction part. This is something that I prepared for myself. You can use the same thing if you want to, and you can change it however you want to. We don't want to get into details, something general. Remember, it isn't scored, but it will be sent together with your score report to the institution you've selected. So 25 seconds to prepare. Good, and they're good. You got 30 seconds to speak. You don't need to speak the whole 30 seconds. Speak 20 seconds, 25 seconds. Just give some general information about yourself. Try to keep your natural pace. Natural pace is natural speed. Not too fast, not too slow. Don't shout, don't whisper. We want to keep everything natural, as it says in the scorebook. Do not hesitate. Hesitation means pausing where you shouldn't pause. So these tips that I'm giving you right now, do not hesitate, do not correct your mistakes. This is mostly for the speaking section, which we're going to enter right now. But because this part is a bit important, as I told you, it'll be sent together with your score report. We just want to consider it here as well. So hesitation means pausing where you should not pause. Do not hesitate. For example, my name is Sina. It's like I forgot my name. So no hesitations. Do not correct your mistakes. I'll tell you in detail why these are important later on. Again, as I said, is not scored. I'll be sent together with your score report to the institution you've selected, and you won't be able to re-record it. You just got one chance to record this part. All right, let's start with the first task. The first task of the exam, it is called read aloud. Take a look at the question. It says, look at the text below. In 35 seconds, you must read this text aloud as naturally and clearly as possible. You have 35 seconds to read aloud. So they're going to give you 6 or 7 paragraphs, like this one that you can see here. 6 or 7 paragraphs. They're going to give you between 35 to 40 seconds to prepare. Why 35 to 40? The texts that are longer, they'll give you 40 seconds to prepare. And then you're going to hear a beep. Once you hear the beep, it means that it starts recording your voice. And then you got 40 seconds to record your voice. Okay, so this is the first task. This is called the status bar. You'll see the countdown here, the 35 or 40 second countdown here. Then you're going to hear a beep, and then it starts recording your voice, and you have to speak aloud into the microphone. All right, let's do an example. Is the first one. All right, Angel, do you want to start? Can I ask you to please read this for yourself once, then whenever you're ready, please read it aloud for us.
Yeah. Can I start?
Yeah, sure.
Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, sorry,
No worries.
my screen has been gone. Yeah, sorry, I will start again.
Okay.
Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, people lose their tempers most often in yellow rooms and babies cries more than in. The reason may be that yellow is the hardest color on the eye. On the other hand, it speeds metabolism and enchants concentration. Think of yellow legal pads and post-its notes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So try to read it with meaning and express the words. You don't need to know the meaning of each and every of the words, but try to understand the whole concept, what it is about, because it will help you with your intonation. So if you know the meaning in that first 35, 40 seconds, which you have time, your preparation time, Try to read it for yourself to see what it is, the whole concept, the whole meaning of it, not each individual word. For example, once I know the meaning, it will help me with my intonation. Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, people lose their tempers most often in yellow rooms and babies cry more in them. Pronounce everything clearly, especially the S's, EDs, ands, thes. Because it's a computer. This computer will score us for anything that it detects. Let's take, for example, this part. It says it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. So if I read it too fast, like it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. If it was an IELTS examiner sitting in front of me, they'll probably understand that I said the S, the and, but it was too fast. But this is a computer that is scoring us, so it will only score us for things it detects. So pronounce everything clearly. It speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. You don't need to be too weird about it. Do not try to read it like it speeds metabolism and enhances. No, you don't need to do that. But remember to pronounce everything clearly. Intonation, the way the pitch of your voice goes up and down. So let me read you the whole thing for you guys once. Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, people lose their tempers most often in yellow rooms and babies cry more in them. The reason may be that yellow is the hardest color on the eye. On the other hand, it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. Think of yellow legal pads and post-it notes. Pause where it is needed. We have to pause at the commas, pause at the full stops, and remember that the amount you pause at a comma is half the amount you pause at a full stop. Word stress is also important here. For example, this word, optimistic, the stress is at the beginning, right? Optimistic. If I try to read it like optimistic, the stress is at the wrong place. So word stress is also important. And keep your natural pace, not too fast, not too slow. Don't shout, don't whisper. We want to keep everything natural as it says in the scorebook. So what is it scored for? All the speaking section, it's scored based on 3 items: content, pronunciation, and fluency. So all the speaking section is scored based on these 3 items. What do we mean by content? Content means that you have to read each and every of these words. Do not eliminate any of the words, or do not even add any extra words. So that is content. Pronunciation. So look, when they were designing the PT exam, they used thousands of candidates from around 120 different countries with different accents. So it doesn't matter if you have an accent, a British accent, American accent, Korean accent, an Indian accent, it doesn't matter. The computer will still detect your accent. But you have to say the pronunciation correctly. For example, this word metabolism, if I try to read it like metabolism, that's not about accent anymore, and that's about the wrong pronunciation. So words like this, often, right? So in American, we pronounce the T, often. In British, you do not pronounce the T, often. Which one should I say? Both is correct. The good news is in the speaking section, any accent is okay. If it's Australian, if it's British or American, whatever you think is correct, it is okay with PTE. But again, it has to be the correct pronunciation. The intonation also is important here. It helps you with your fluency and your pronunciation scores. So the third one, fluency. So what do we mean by this? It means reading without hesitation, reading without stopping. By stopping, I mean the places you should stop. You should pause some places, but do not hesitate or pause where you should not. For example, if I say, yellow is the most optimistic color. So I lost fluency points here because I hesitated. Let me tell you something else. Pronunciation and fluency, they both have more score than content. They are much more important than content. They have more score than content. So if I pause and hesitate in order to say optimistic correctly, I would lose points for my fluency, but gain content points. But it's not worth it because content has less points. So even if you make a mistake in this task, even if you make a mistake, do not go back and correct it. Just pass over it like nothing has happened. Yellow is the most optimum color, yet surprisingly, people lose their temper often in yellow rooms. Whatever happens, keep your fluency. Do not risk your fluency for content. So no hesitations, do not correct your mistakes, do not restart your sentence. And so you might think to yourself, what if it was a word that was too difficult? For example, this word optimistic. If it was too difficult for me to pronounce it, what should I say? Should I just skip over it or should I try to say it? So this is my theory. I think, look, you guys got 35 to 40 seconds to prepare, right? In that 35 to 40 seconds, you're going to read this as quickly as you can. You're going to read this as quickly as you can. And you're going to get prepared, right? So it's either optimistic or optimistic, So I might think to myself, all right, this is probably optimistic. Once I hear the beep, beep, yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly. So that was the wrong pronunciation and I lost pronunciation. But I still had a 50-50 chance. It was either optimistic or optimistic. So I think that you should take your chance. But in case that you're not losing your fluency, sometimes the word might be too difficult. You might think to yourself, by even trying to say that, I'll probably get the pronunciation wrong. I'll probably lose my fluency. I'll probably lose my concentration throughout the rest of the paragraph. So if you think the word is too difficult for you to say, you can either skip it or say a word similar or just say the word something. Yellow is the most something color, just to fill that part. So if the word is too difficult, skip it or say a word similar or say the word something. These are some options that you can consider here in this task read aloud. So content, pronunciation, and fluency. Remember these three. Okay, let me just read it for you guys one more time. Yellow is the most optimistic color. Yet surprisingly, people lose their tempers most often in yellow rooms and babies cry more in them. The reason may be that yellow is the hardest color on the eye. On the other hand, it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. Think of yellow legal pads and post-it notes. Okay, Angel, can you please just read it one more time for us?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Yellow is the most optimistic color, yet surprisingly, people lose their temper most often in yellow rooms and babies cry more than in them. The reason may be that yellow is the hardest color on the eye. On the other hand, it speeds metabolism and enhances concentration. Think of yellow, legal pads, and post-it notes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Just remember this word, optimistic, optimistic.
Optimistic.
Optimistic, exactly. And this one is enhances. Enhances.
Enhances.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to another one. All right, this one. Okay. Atkan, can you please read this one? And I want you to please read it for yourself once, and then whenever you're ready, please read it aloud. Atkan, are you there? Oh, you're there. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Please just read it for yourself, then whenever you're ready, please read it aloud.
Okay. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? A biotechnologist who led his company in international research, an ordinary welder who gained international fame throughout his work, or a photographer commissioned widely for series of photos.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so intonation. This is only this is only 2 questions, right? The first one is a short question. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? But the second one is a long question, which is extended with commas. So let me read the whole thing for you guys once. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? A biotechnologist who led his company in international research, an ordinary welder who gained international fame through his work, or a photographer? Okay, so this word is pronounced photographer. Photograph is okay, right? We got photograph, but the person who takes the pictures, in British, in American, we say photographer, photographer, complimented widely for a series of photos. So can you see the whole structure of the sentence? Who do you think is the most glamorous person? This, or that? So you got to keep this intonation while you're reading the whole thing. You got 35 to 40 seconds before it begins, so read it aloud for yourself. So in that first 35 to 40 seconds, that preparation time you have, it's not going to, the microphone is not recording your voice. It will record your voice after hearing the beep. I'll show you how it is in the actual exam. So in that 35 to 40 seconds, I believe that it's much better if you can read it aloud for yourself. I want you to read it aloud so you can hear your own voice. Why am I asking you to do this? The first reason, because it's just like a warm-up for your voice, you know. Who do you, and how you should read it is something like this. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? A biotechnologist who led his company in international research. Okay, it has a comma, an ordinary welder. So this is how you should read it for yourself. I want you to hear your own voice. So the reasons that I am asking you to do this is, first of all, it's just like a warm-up for you guys. And the second reason is sometimes when we're just reading it in our head, we're pronouncing it correctly, but once we want to say it, it will be quite difficult for us. So it's better to practice it aloud. Do not use self-correction, just pass over the mistakes. Why? As I told you, because you would lose points for your fluency. Do not hesitate, do not correct your mistakes. I know we're all used to correcting our mistakes. Even when we're talking, if we make a mistake, we go back and correct it, right? But you got to get used to not correcting your mistakes here in the PTE exam. All right, so can I please ask you to read it one more time for us?
Okay. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? A biotechnologist, okay.
Biotechnologist.
Biotechnologist. Okay. Who do you think is the most glamorous person? A biotechnologist who led his company in international research. An ordinary welder who gained international fame through his work. Or a photographer complimented widely or a series of photos.
Okay, that was much better. Thank you. And remember, so the pauses you made at the commas, it kind of sounded like a full stop. Try to make it sound like a comma. If it sounds like a full stop, it'll be something like this. A biotechnologist who led his company in international research. An ordinary welder who gained international fame through his work. You know, that sounds like a full stop. But if you want it to sound like a comma, a biotechnologist who led his company in international research, an ordinary welder who gained international fame through his work, or a photographer, you know, make it sound like a comma, make it sound like the rest is coming, and the pause should be shorter. All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so you guys got 35 to 40 seconds before it begins, so read it aloud for yourself. Practice in noise. Why am I asking you to do this? So look, the exam centers, there's just a room full of stations and computers. So you're all gonna start with read aloud, right? You don't have the same questions, but you're all gonna start with read aloud. So there's gonna be a lot of surrounding voice. So what you can do in order to get used to having the surrounding voice is to practice in noise. So like what I used to do for my own exam, I used to open a website for an English radio station and just let it play in the background so I can get used to the sound. You can turn on the TV. Some of you might have kids at home, you know, 2 or 3 kids at home, so it's always noisy. So remember that always practice in noise. And sometimes I've seen some test takers that they speak too loud in the exam centers. Let me first say this. If they're too loud, You can just raise your hand and the person there, the invigilator there, they'll come and ask them to keep it down. But the best thing is to get used to it. These people that their sounds are too loud, they think that if they speak louder, they might get a higher score. Or they might think to themselves that if we speak louder, we might not hear the voice of other test takers there. Again, that if you're unlucky, that person might be sitting next to you. So the best thing is to just get used to it. In our classes, when we have many students in the class, I first ask each student, sorry about that, I'm just first ask each student to read it individually, and then I ask them to read it all together to see how it is in the actual exam center. So many of them get annoyed by this. So the best thing is to practice all the speaking section, not this task, read aloud, all the speaking section in noise. Click the next button once you've finished. Let me just show it to you how it looks in the actual exam. So you will see a picture like this in the actual exam. This is called the status bar. As you can see, you got a 35, or again, it depends on how long the text is, 40 seconds countdown. This is your preparation time. The microphone is not recording your voice during this time. So you can read it as I ask you, read it aloud for yourself. Once you pick the general topic for your paper, you need to come up with thesis. Thesis, yes, it's thesis. Your thesis is the main and focal. So read it with a bit lower voice and a quicker in order to finish the whole thing. Then you're going to hear the beep and it starts recording your voice. So this time you wouldn't see the numbers, but this bar, it will take you 40 seconds it will take 40 seconds to fill this bar. Okay, so it's recording our voice right now. So what I'm trying to ask you is, it might take me this much, not until the end. It might take me 20 seconds. I don't need 40 seconds to read the whole thing. I'm going to finish in 25 seconds, 20 seconds, 25 seconds. So what should I do for the rest of it? Should I just let it go? Should I just let it record the rest of it? No. Once you finish reading it, again, it might take 20, 25 seconds. It depends on how long the text is. Once you finish, click on next yourself, all right? Click on next. Why should we do this? Because the microphone is recording, right? And if we stop talking, it might detect the surrounding voice. And just imagine that person that I was telling you about, the person that is talking too loud. If they're sitting next to you, your microphone might detect the sound of that person or the sound of the room. As I told you, content, pronunciation, and fluency. Content doesn't only mean that you read less words. If you say more words than it's written there, then you lose content point as well. So it might detect the surrounding voice and you might lose point for your content. So once you finish, click on next. Do not let it record the surrounding voice. There's something else called the 3-second rule. What is this 3-second rule? The 3-second rule is that after hearing the beep, once it starts, or it's better for me to say, once it starts recording your voice, not the first 35, 40 seconds, after hearing the beep, once it starts recording your voice, if you do not speak for more than 3 seconds, then the microphone will stop recording your voice for that question. If it's in the beginning, if it's in the middle, or at the end. So once you hear the beep, you should start talking. If you pause for 3 seconds, then you'll see a message which says that the microphone has stopped recording your voice due to not hearing anything. Okay, that is the message you'll see. If you're going to pause in the middle of the paragraph for more than 3 seconds, that's bad news. You know, you're going to lose a lot of fluency points and it will stop recording your voice. So at the end, if you don't even click on next, automatically after 3 seconds, once it's not detecting anything, after 3 seconds, it will stop recording your voice for that question. But again, we don't want it to detect anything in that 3 seconds as well. So once you finish, click on next. So remember the 3-second rule is for all the speaking section. Once it starts recording your voice, if you pause, if you do not speak for more than 3 seconds, if your microphone doesn't detect your voice, any voice, for more than 3 seconds, it will stop recording your voice for that question. It might sound kind of scary and difficult at the beginning, but it's nothing important. Once you hear the beep, just start talking and do not stop until you end. And once you end it, just click on next. It has a high point, so pay attention. So look, guys, this is the test format of the exam. We got 20 tasks here in the PTE exam. Personal introduction, we talked about this part. The first task is read aloud, repeat sentence, describe image, retell lecture, answer short question. These 5 tasks are for speaking. The last 2 are for writing, summarize written text and essay. We've got 5 tasks in reading and 8 tasks in listening. So there are overall 20 tasks in the PTE exam. So the first task, read aloud. It's the first task of speaking, right? So obviously it has speaking points and it has significant points. It has around 30% of your speaking points comes from read aloud. 6 or 7 paragraphs they will give you in the exam. 30% of your speaking point comes from read aloud. So it has significant points. But the thing about this exam is they say that the exam is integrated. What do we mean by this? It means that it is in the speaking section, right? So obviously you're going to gain speaking points. But in addition to speaking points, you are also gaining reading points. You can get 25% of reading points by doing read aloud. We're not even close to the reading section, but you're gaining reading points from read aloud. The next task, repeat sentence. In this task, you will hear a sentence and then you have to try to repeat it. It is in the speaking section, so obviously it has speaking points, but in addition to speaking points, it has also listening points. Let me show you in this table. Here it is. The first task, read it aloud, 6 to 7 of these. As I told you, 35 to 40 seconds to prepare, 40 seconds to answer. 33% speaking points, 27% of your reading points. So these percentages are not accurate, okay? They can be a few percent less or more. It depends on the number of the questions and how long the texts are. But as you can see, it has 33% speaking points and 27% reading points. Repeat sentence. You're going to hear a sentence and you have to repeat that sentence. 30% speaking points and 23% listening points. So by doing the first 2 tasks of speaking, not only are you gaining speaking points, but you're gaining reading and listening points and significant points in both. So these 2 are really important. Look, there are many other tasks like these 2 which have score for more than 1 section. They are scored for 2 sections. But the most important one are read aloud, repeat sentence. The first task of reading and writing fill in the blanks, as you can see by its name, it has significant points for our reading and for our writing. And write from dictation, the last task of the exam. It is in the listening section, but in addition to listening points, it also has writing points. So these 4, read aloud, repeat sentence, reading and writing fill in the blanks, and write from dictation, these 4 combined together, they have half amount of the full mark, the full score, half. So by doing these 4 correctly without any mistakes, you can probably gain 45, 50 out of 90. So the minimum in PTE is 10, the maximum is 90. Doing these 4 without any mistakes, you can get 45, 50. It depends on the number of questions. I don't know exactly, but you can gain half amount of the full score. Read aloud and repeat sentence. I believe that they're kind of more important. Why am I saying this? Is because they're at the beginning of the exam. This is where you're stressed. This is where you feel the anxiety, right? Okay, so am I going to get accepted? Can I get my desired score in this exam? So this is where you're stressed. You should control your stress during this first section. If you do good in read aloud and repeat sentence, you are increasing your chances of getting the 79 plus, if that's what you're aiming for. If it's not too bad, if you think you did well, but not too good, you have to say goodbye to 79, but you can still get a 65. But if you do bad in read aloud and repeat sentence, you probably have to say goodbye to 65 as well. The reason that I'm saying is that they have significant points. They're like 60% of the speaking points comes from these 2 first tasks. I don't want to scare you guys. I just want to tell you how important they are. And you should prepare yourself for this section. Okay. It's the first task of the exam. Accent is important. Just pronounce it correctly. Start talking once you hear the beep, not sooner. If you want to take a breath at the middle, leave it for the full stop or for the commas, and it has speaking and reading points. Okay, so the next one, Artie, could you please read this for yourself once, and then whenever you're ready, could you please read it aloud?
Sure. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, let's begin.
A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connection, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 1580s and, in a remarkably short time, became the greatest playwright not of his age alone, but of all time. How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare?
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. No, that was really good. And just remember that
I
this
thought I can pronounce
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. Yeah, just twist the
No,
tongue.
that was a good effort. So, and look, just remember that this word is pronounced provincial. Provincial.
Province.
Provincial.
Can you say it again?
Provincial.
Provincial, not
Yeah,
provincial.
Yeah, exactly. Provincial. Okay.
Provincial.
Focus on where you have to pause. You have to pause at the commas, pause at the full stops. What are these two lines for? If you see a sentence between these two lines, so it's like an extra sentence. Okay, so if you eliminate the sentence between these two lines, it'll still make sense. A young man from a small provincial town moved to London in the late 1580s. So it still makes sense. So this is how they
So
are.
we don't have to pause
But
when
you
there
have
is the
to
dash.
pause. Yeah, you have to pause here as well.
You have to. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connection, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 1580s, and in a remarkably short time became the greatest playwright, not of his age alone, but of all time. How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? So we pause at these. If you see a line between two words, there's only one line between two words. Those words are called hyphen words. For example, part-time, full-time. So those two, you got to read them together. But it's not always about commas and full stops, you know. For example, the word but. We usually have a small pause before but, right? For example, I wanted to go outside, but it started raining. I wanted to go to my friend's house, but I didn't feel well. So we usually have a pause before but as well. So it's not always about commas and full stops. It's about your intonation as well. There's something else called chunking. What do we mean by this? It means a group of words, like actually a noun phrase, a group of words which should be said all together. For example, a small provincial town, as you can see, it's a noun with adjectives before it. You got to say all of these together. You said it perfectly, Artie. That was really good. A small provincial town, or for this part, the greatest playwright, you know, the greatest playwright. This is a noun phrase, and she said all together. Even the rest of it became the greatest playwright, not of his age alone, but of all time. Not of his age alone, but of all time. If I try to read it like became the greatest playwright, not of his age alone, but of all time, you know, that sounds
that
weird.
doesn't make sense.
It sounds pretty weird. So chunking is also important here. Clear pronunciation, as I told you, the S's, EDs, INGs, and the years, 1580s. So numbers like 15 and 50, 16, 60, they're really close to each other, right? So pronounce it clearly, 1580s. And as you can see, the last part is a question. How did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? So read it as a question. All right, can I please ask you to read it just one more time?
Sure.
So this word was provincial, provincial, and Shakespeare.
Okay. A young man from a small provincial town, a man without independent wealth, without powerful family connection, and without a university education, moved to London in the late 90s. Sorry,
No worries.
90s, I don't know. In late 1580s, and in a remarkably short time, became the greatest playwright not of his age alone, but of all time. How did
Shakespeare. Shakes. Like shake.
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 I know. It just
Shakespeare.
if I read it on my own, like on my mind, I feel like I can say it, but
Yeah.
it's-
I know what you mean, but that is still okay. So how did Shakespeare become Shakespeare? Okay, that was perfect.
how
Thank you
did
so much.
Shakespeare become Shakespeare?
Thank you. That was pretty good. Thank you so much. All right.
I think the second was worse than the first one.
No, that was pretty good. That was acceptable. Thank you. All right. The next one, David. Could you please be kind enough to read this for us? I don't want you to please read it for yourself once, then whenever you're ready, please read it out.
Okay. All right. When countries assess their annual carbon dioxide emissions, they count up their cars and power stations, but bushfires are not included, presumably because they are deemed to be events beyond human control. In Australia, Victoria alone sees several 100,000 hectares burn each year. In both 2004 and the present summer, the figure has been over 1 million hectares.
Perfect. That was pretty good. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was really good. Thank you. Okay, let me just read it for you once as well. When countries assess their annual carbon dioxide emissions, as you can see, again, this should be all set together. Their annual carbon dioxide emissions. Okay, so when countries assess their annual carbon dioxide emissions, they count up their cars and power stations. But bushfires are not included, presumably because they are deemed to be events beyond human control. In Australia, Victoria alone sees several 100,000 hectares, again, said all together, several 100,000 hectares burn each year in both 2004. So Americans usually say 2004. British, they don't say the N, 2004. Whatever you say is correct. Whatever you like to, whatever is more comfortable for you. In both 2004 and the present summer, the figure has been over 1 million hectares. Okay, that was really good, David. Thank you so much. All right, so what you guys should do is you should sign into the portal and practice here in the question. If you go to the question why section, so in this portal, we have many examples of which were brought in the actual exam. And also, in addition to that, there are some extra texts as well. So if you go to question wise, if you can see here, it's read aloud. Okay, we got around nearly 400 samples of this, and you can practice here. If you read it, as you can see, again, just like the format of the exam, you got 35 seconds to prepare. And then it will give you, again, the same amount of time to read it aloud. So I'm just going to read for you guys one to see how it is scored. I'm not asking you to do all of the 400 samples, but as you can see, read aloud is a task which, if you do more, if you practice more, you get familiar with more examples, you get familiar with more words, their pronunciation, their meaning. So practice as much as you can. So as you can see, you hear the beep. A unique characteristic of online shopping environments is that they allow vendors to create retail interfaces with highly interactive features. One desirable form of interactivity from a consumer perspective is the implementation of sophisticated tools to assist shoppers in their purchase decisions by customizing the electronic shopping environment to their individual preferences. At the beginning, I was speaking, so it's not, maybe it wouldn't give me a good score because I was still talking at the beginning when I started recording. But as I told you, it is scored based on your content, pronunciation, and fluency. Try to practice as much as you can. This is an important task. As you saw in that table, it has significant points for your speaking, and also, in addition to that, it has significant points for your reading. Okay, so it didn't submit it. I don't know what's wrong right now, but it will submit and give you score for those three. Once it gives you the score, there is a part at the bottom of it which says the words that were mispronounced, which you had pronunciation mistakes. Try to keep that below 8. Okay, no more than 8 mispronunciations. Okay, no more than 8. Just remember that once you score it and you see the result, it will tell you the amount of mistakes that you made in your pronunciation. So it should be always below 8. So try practicing in the portal. All right, so let's move on to the next task. Let me just show you what it is. So the second task of the exam, it is called repeat sentence. I'm going to introduce this task to see how it is. And then tomorrow, in our session tomorrow, we will practice some read aloud and repeat sentences in the actual timing. Okay. So this question, it says you will hear a sentence. Please repeat the sentence exactly as you hear it. You will hear the sentence only once. So you're going to hear 10 to 12 sentences, and then you have to repeat it. So this is after 6 or 7 read aloud. 6 or 7 paragraphs that they're going to give you. It's just like this. Let me show you.
So how many seconds do we get? Can we write it down like when it says?
I'm going to show it to you right now. Just give me a second. I'm just going to show you about the timing. We're going to talk about the timing. So look. Okay, look. As you can see here, 6 or 7 read aloud.
Bizarrely complex. The game's into a bit of a drag.
And then when she clicks on next, we go to repeat sentence.
The elephant is the largest.
Okay, 6 or 7 read alouds, then repeat sentence. In repeat sentence, it says you will hear a sentence. Please repeat the sentence exactly as you hear it. So about the timing, Garden, that you asked, take a look.
Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture.
So look, you'll hear a sentence, and this time you would not hear a beep. But once the sentence ends, after 1 to 2 seconds, then it starts recording your voice. Okay. Once the sentence ends, without hearing the beep, you should wait for 1 to 2 seconds and then start repeating the sentence. Let me show it to you guys one more time. So in read aloud, you heard the beep, right? But in repeat sentence, you would not hear the beep. Take a look one more time at the timing.
Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture.
1, 2, it starts recording your voice. So you wouldn't hear a beep, but once the sentence ends, it will start recording your voice after 1 to 2 seconds. So you should not repeat the sentence too quickly. If you start repeating the sentence just when the sentence ends, then it might not detect your first 1 or 2 words because it hasn't started recording. You should wait 1 to 2 seconds and then start repeating it. Okay, so let's do it one more time. Artie, could you please just repeat it yourself?
Yes.
Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture.
Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture.
Perfect, perfect. So you pause that amount of time, and remember, guys, we don't want to pause too much because we got the 3-second rule. If you pause too much, if it's over 3 seconds, okay, we got 1 second before it starts recording. Once it starts recording, if you wait for more than 3 seconds, it will stop recording. Thank you so much. Angel, could you please repeat the second one?
Yep.
The circulation desk is located on the ground floor.
The audio was not clear. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Let me just play one more time.
The circulation desk is located on the ground floor.
Sorry again. It's really breaking for me.
Oh, okay. So the sentence was, the circulation desk is located on the ground floor. The circulation desk is a desk which is located in libraries, where you can borrow the books or return the books. So I just wanted to show you guys how it looks in the actual exam. How many questions are we going to have? 10 to 12 of these in the exam. Some of them might be simple and short sentences. Some of them might be moderate. Some of them might be long and difficult sentences. So 10 to 12 repeat sentences in the exam. Again, it's scored based on your content, pronunciation, and fluency. And just like read aloud, content has less score than pronunciation and fluency. So by knowing this, just like read aloud, if you make a mistake, just pass over it. If you forgot a word, if you didn't understand a word, just pass over it. I'm going to show you the technique. I'm going to tell you how to do this. But just remember that content has less score. So keeping your fluency throughout the whole sentence is much more important than saying all of the words. Just keep your pronunciation. If you forget a word, if you miss a word, if you didn't understand a word, just pass over it or say something similar. We will do some examples and I'll show you what I mean exactly. You're going to have 10 to 12. The sentences are usually around 10 words. It could be less, it could be more. You wouldn't hear a beep in the exam. Again, just like read aloud, once you finish, click on next. You must have the ability to talk smoothly without hesitation, so that we do not want to hesitate. The microphone will stop recording your voice if you do not speak for more than 3 seconds. Don't struggle for saying the word. Okay, try to keep your fluency, keep your natural pace. Okay, natural speed. Try to copy the speed of the spokesperson. Try to copy the speed and the intonation, not the accent. Okay, do not copy the accent. If he has a British accent, do not copy the accent, but copy the intonation and the speed of that spokesperson, the sentence that you hear. Do not repeat anything. Do not correct anything. No false start. Again, by false start, we means repeating sooner than you should. So if you do not pause that 1 to 2 seconds, if you start repeating that sentence exactly once it's finished, it will take 1 to 2 seconds before it begins to record, right? So you might not detect your first few words. So the sentence finishes, wait 2 seconds, and then start repeating, and not too late. Do not wait for 3-4 seconds. That's too late. No ums and ahs, no thinking sounds, or in other words, we say no fillers. Professor Smith will be late for today's no thinking sounds, no fillers. Try not to skip any of the words. So look, let me show you one more time.
Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture.
So the sentence is, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. Let's just imagine that I forget the middle part, right? Will be late. Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. If I try to say it like, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture, I hesitated there. I lost a lot of fluency points there. But if I forgot the middle part, it's much better to say it like this. If I just eliminate that part, it's even better. So the sentence, again, one more time, it was, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. If I forget or didn't understand the middle part, Professor Smith for today's lecture. You know, just stick the first part and the end together and eliminate that middle part in order to keep your fluency. You know, we don't want to hesitate there in order to say the content. Content has less score than pronunciation and fluency. So one way is to eliminate that part and stick the rest to each other to make a full sentence. Another way is to replace it with some words which are similar, or other words which are not similar. For example, again, the word something. So Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. Professor Smith, something for today's lecture. Just saying the word something is even better. Sometimes you might say or make sounds which are similar to what you heard. Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. Maybe I didn't understand it, maybe I forgot it, but maybe I am able to say some words or make some sounds similar to what I heard. Professor Smith, today's lecture. You know, just making some sounds which were similar to what I heard. Even that is good. Okay, so the reason that I'm giving you some options, so the first one was to eliminate that part that you forget. The second one was to replace it with a word which sounded familiar or the word something. And our third option was to make a sound similar to what we heard. So the reason that I'm giving you options, because it depends on the sentence. It depends on if did you understand it or didn't you understand it. Can you repeat it, or it's a new word for you? You haven't heard it before, so it'll be difficult for you to repeat it. So the repeat sentences, they are usually simple sentences. Most of them are simple sentences. But when does it get difficult? It's first of all, it's when there's a word inside the sentence that you haven't heard before. So repeating a word that you haven't heard before is quite difficult. And the other way that it gets difficult is sometimes the sentence is too long. Once it gets too long, it's kind of difficult for us to repeat it, right? So again, it depends on the situation. It depends on if you understood it or if you didn't understand it. It depends on how your reaction is at that time. But what I'm trying to say is whatever happens, try to keep your fluency. Do not lose your fluency. Just make up words, eliminate words, but stick the rest of them together. Do not hesitate in the middle. The ones that you understood, even like in the sentence, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. Even if I understood 4 words, Professor late today lecture. You know, just say those 4 words, try to copy the intonation, speak clearly and loudly, or not too loud, just speak clearly and loudly, copy the speed and the intonation of the spokesperson. So what I'm trying to say is whatever happens, do not give up. Okay, just a few more points about this and then we'll finish today's session. So that's what I'm saying, do not skip any of the words. Sometimes you have to skip them, sometimes you have to replace them with words, sometimes you have to make sounds which are similar. But whatever happens, do not risk your pronunciation or fluency for content. First of all, listen. Don't worry so much about repeating that you forget to listen. Try to listen and understand the sentence. Once you understand the sentence, it's much more easier for you to repeat it. If you say a sentence to me in your own language, so it's obviously quite difficult for me to repeat it. But if you say it in my own language, in English, it will be quite easier for me. So try to understand it. There's another technique. So the first technique, as you can see right in here, you do not have enough time to write down the whole sentence, right? But there's a technique that you can use as well. It's called letter writing. So you can write down the first letter of each word. For example, in this one, the employment demand in engineering is increasing rapidly. Let's take a look one more time. The employment demand in engineering is increasing rapidly. So this is a technique that you can use. It's called letter writing. You can write down the first letter of each word. Because we don't have enough time to write down the whole sentence, we can write down the first letter of each word and then repeat it. Okay, this is a technique that we can use. Is it good to write down the first letter, or should I just focus, listen, and repeat it? Again, that depends on you. That depends on how you're more comfortable. But try to practice this technique. See how it feels. See if it's for you or not. Look, if you want to write down, there are a few steps. The first step is that we've never written down the first letter of each word. So it's going to be difficult for you to write down the first letter of each word at the beginning. The second step, you will learn this technique of writing down the first letter of each word. But the next step is once you want to repeat it, then you'll start forgetting what these letters stand for. What was the E for? What was the I for? You forget what that letter stands for. But don't worry, you will get used to that as well. But the third step is to doing all of these together. Writing down, listening, understanding, writing down, and repeating the whole sentence with the same intonation, with the same speed at that amount of time. Not more than 4 seconds, not more than 3 to 4 seconds after the sentence has finished, okay? So mastering this, it might take some time. I've seen students do master it and learn it in actually a few days. Some of them, they take around 2 weeks of practice, some of them maybe 2 months. Again, but I'm not forcing you guys to use this technique. It's just an option. So I was reading in different blogs and web pages about this technique to see if most students are writing down or if they are listening, just in listening, focusing and repeating. So what I saw, what the conclusion that I got to was that it said that the students who English is their first language, they usually just listen and repeat it. But the ones that English are their second language, they usually like to write it down. But again, we got many students who that if they feel that if they write it down, they might lose their concentration. So again, I am not forcing you guys to write it down. This is just an option. I want you guys to practice in the portal to see how it is, how you feel about it. And we'll do some more practice tomorrow, okay? And just remember that you're speaking for a purpose. You're informing, you're explaining, so do not change the intonation. If the sentence was, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture, do not, if you doubt what you're saying, you'll change your intonation. It will be some, Professor Smith will be late for today's lecture. Don't change the intonation. If you doubt it, you'll change the intonation. The better your vocabulary, the better you get as repeat sentence and in the reading section. So the more words you know, it will be much more easier for you to repeat them. Remember, practice in the portal, guys. Practice all these. We got this repeat sentence section here as well in the portal. Practice these, and tomorrow we'll do some more practices for read aloud and repeat sentence in that actual timing to see how we do in that time. Okay.
Oh, good. Thank you, Sina. Good night.
Thank you.
No worries, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.